On May 1st, 2017, in Severodvinsk, Russia, a woman was viciously attacked in her flat by a man who showed no mercy. In the brutal struggle, she was terrified and desperate as she fought for her life. Amid this life-threatening chaos, her 15-year-old son returned home. As he stepped inside, the horrifying sight stopped him in his tracks. Without hesitation, driven by courage beyond his years, he rushed to defend his mother. But this heroic act came at a terrible cost. The attacker, with brutal and unrelenting force, turned his fury on him instead. Their assailant fled, leaving both mother and son battered and seemingly lifeless. But the horror of that day was only the beginning of their story. This case hit me hard. The bravery of this young lad is out of this world, and we'd all like to think that we'd do the same. There are a few twists in this case which left me with mixed emotions, but it all began from the actions of a violent man who should never have been there in the first place. There's not a great deal of images for this video, so please bear with me on that, but there's a lot to get through in this short video. But before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and following me on Instagram. It all really helps. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. This case begins in a communal apartment in Severodvinsk, Russia, where tensions were already brewing. The mother, Natalia Krapovin, had repeatedly pleaded with the authorities to prevent Roman Pronin, a convicted murderer recently released from prison, from moving into their neighborhood. Her concerns were justified. This was a densely populated area with many families, and Pronin posed an undeniable threat. Despite her warnings, Pronin was allowed to settle nearby, creating an atmosphere of unease. Little is known about the personal backgrounds of those involved, but what unfolded on May 1st, 2017 was a tragedy set in motion by that decision. That fateful day would leave a lasting scar, not just on Natalia and her family, but on the entire community. On that tragic day, Roman Pronin, heavily intoxicated, approached Natalia near her flat and propositioned her for intimacy. When she rejected his advances, his anger turned into violence. He forced his way into her home and began to brutally beat her. The assault escalated as he grabbed a knife, pinned her down, and stabbed her repeatedly in a horrific frenzy. At this horrifying moment, 15-year-old Vanya Krapovin returned home from school. What he walked into was a nightmare. His mother, bloodied and screaming, pinned beneath a man who was relentlessly stabbing her. Without hesitation, Vanya's instinct to protect his mother took over. He picked up a dumbbell nearby and charged at Pronin. Unfortunately, Pronin wrestled the dumbbell from Vanya and struck him on the head with it, delivering at least 3 devastating blows. The force of the attack crushed Vanya's skull, leaving him gravely injured. The room fell silent. Natalia lay motionless in a pool of blood, and Vanya collapsed beside her. Believing he had killed them both, Pronin fled the scene, leaving behind the devastating aftermath of his violence. Not long after fleeing the scene, Pronin asked a friend to help him dispose of the bodies, but instead of assisting, the friend immediately phoned the police. The authorities quickly arrested Pronin, and an ambulance was dispatched to help Vanya and Natalia. The aftermath was grim. Vanya fell into a coma for 9 months. His skull shattered and his brain severely damaged. Natalia was left with 27 stab wounds and was fighting for her life in the hospital. Miraculously, both survived, but their journeys of recovery would take vastly different paths. 37-year-old Pronin was charged with double manslaughter. Despite claiming his innocence, he said that he was merely breaking up a fight between the mother and son. The courts dismissed his story and he was sentenced to 14 years in a strict regime colony. Months later, Natalia was discharged from the hospital after extensive treatment, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. Vanya faced a far greater battle. Surgeons removed part of his brain and most of the frontal bone of his skull. His injuries needed costly titanium plates and long-term medical care. A national fundraising campaign on a popular Russian TV show began and contributed to the cause. A doctor said, whilst Vanya was in a coma, he is in a vegetative state. He cannot see or hear us. Probably for us, these books and songs were even more important than for Vanya himself. About a year after the attack, Vanya began to show small but significant signs of recovery. He started recognizing his nurses and was able to eat simple foods such as porridge and mashed meals, giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Once his condition stabilized, his journey through various medical facilities began. He was first transferred to the Arkhangelsk Regional Children's Hospital, where his care continued under specialized supervision. From there, he was sent to a clinic in St. Petersburg and eventually to the prestigious Moscow Research Institute of Emergency Children's Surgery. Between intensive courses at the Research Institute, Vanya stayed at the Martha and Mary Convent. The convent provided him with a supportive environment for rehabilitation, offering not only medical care but also a place of peace and recovery, as he fought to regain some semblance of a normal life. However, Natalia struggled to cope with the trauma of the attack. She visited Vanya only twice during his stay in hospital, turning to alcohol as a means of coping and blaming herself for her son's suffering. Her limited presence sparked public outrage. As the case was highly publicized, Natalia faced judgment and scrutiny from the nation. In a tearful interview on a TV show, she addressed the backlash. She said, and quote, "I beg to be pardoned for not visiting him more frequently, and I ask you, please, help my son. I don't remember what happened that day. Everybody now tells me that I am to blame for everything. I am ready to be treated. I want to be with my son." In October 2018, Vanya was back in intensive care. On what would have been his 16th birthday, he was surrounded by medical staff as he battled complications from the flu. His condition worsened, straining his already fragile body. In those final days, Igor Komisarov, a senior assistant to the chairman of the investigation committee, who had supported Vanya from the beginning, performed a baptism for Vanya right in his hospital ward, as he was not baptized at the time. Komisarov became Vanya's godfather. Tragically, just a few days later, Vanya lost consciousness and passed away. His battle, filled with extraordinary courage and resilience, ended. Recognizing his bravery, Vanya was posthumously awarded the Order of Courage. He was also honored with the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation's Medal, Valor and Courage. These awards were a testament to the strength he had shown in defending his mother against unimaginable odds. Meanwhile, Roman Pronin, serving his sentence in a regime colony, faced new charges as the case was reopened following Vanya's death. Pronin stubbornly stuck to his original story, claiming he had merely intervened to break up a fight between Natalia and Vanya. Pronin stated, "I ask you to make a fair decision and not deprive me of my freedom, because I did not want death, but wanted to prevent a quarrel between Natalia and Vanya. I want to state once again that the crime was committed by Natalia. I saw it with my own eyes." Despite the gravity of the evidence against him, Pronin continued to deny responsibility, while the maximum sentence he could have received was life imprisonment. Unfortunately, I was not able to find the verdict. However, given the national attention this case received, I would hope that justice was served and Pronin faced the full weight of the law for his actions. I wanted to share with you Vanya's story and the bravery he's shown at such a young age. Most people wish they were that courageous, but he actually was. And he also saved his mother's life. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.